Hello, adventurers. My name's Tyler.
And I'm Richard.
On today's episode, we're giving our first impressions of the 2024 Dungeons and Dragons Monster Manual. Welcome to True Strike.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the show.
Yo ho, howdy!
It's here. We have in the studio the collector's edition of the 2024 Monster Manual.
Would you believe
core is complete?
It's not $100.
No, it's not $100. It's only $50.
We're not going to name where, but Richard tried to purchase this book at one of our local game stores, and they were like, yo, it's $100 for this version. He was like, so what?
That hurt my soul.
Yeah.
Because we both like to patron our local game stores.
Anytime we can.
Anytime we can. I love to support my local game store. But artificially jacking up that price because it's a limited edition, but it's not limited yet. Like literally this place that I did go to, which is one of our favorite local game stores,
Absolutely.
had stacks of these things. And I even pre-ordered it from them before driving out there. Actually having my wife drive out there to pick it up for me, just to make sure I got a copy. But just like last time, they had tons of copies.
Yeah.
And they weren't inflating the price to
At
double on launch day.
Yeah.
Although I should have saw this coming, because this is also the place that we went to for Lorcana's release. And they were also really pumping up the prices of Lorcana stuff.
And the same place, when the Dungeon Master's Guide came out, tried selling Richard the 2014 version.
Yeah, as the alternate art cover. Which I don't know if we talked about that on the podcast
no, we didn't.
before. Yeah, they're like, yeah, no, the guy was like, yeah, this is the alt art. This one right here. And I'm like, the 2014 book?
Yeah.
He's like, no, this is the alt art. It's an alternate art.
So we're fortunate enough to not only have actually a very, very cool local game store, a couple of pretty good game stores, and then one that should be like the crowning jewel of the city. It's got everything you'd ever want.
Yeah.
And the people running it aren't great.
Yeah, not great.
So
yeah, it is what it is. But you know, we did get it on launch day.
Yes.
I should say I got it on launch day. I did want to get this edition because the cover is beautiful. It doesn't have the beholder on it. It's got the Illithid on the front.
The Emperor
with the tadpole and everything. It's really, really cool. I love it. This means that I do have to now track down a collector's edition of the Player's Handbook so that I can have the core. I am going to probably pay for that one.
Yeah, that one is limited.
Yeah, that one is now limited, which is funny because I almost bought it when it was in the stores. I already had a copy though.
Yeah, because we got the ones from
we got it from Gen
early.
Con. Yeah, we got it early, and then I went to my another game store, another one of our locals. It's a good one, and I was in there, and they had one copy left. And she was all like, "You sure you don't want to pick up the collector's edition?" And I was like, "I've already got the one from Gen Con. I'm just gonna stay with that one." And I didn't buy it. Regrets.
Yeah. Now you're gonna pay double.
Now I'm gonna pay double for it, but that's okay because I'm gonna complete the set. But yeah, no, having the physical book is nice. Of course, we got the PDF, but I really like reading the book. I like having a book in my hand.
Me too. And you know what? I've got the PDF.
The PDF. That's okay because you have the book now.
Well, it's because you know me. I've got the core like set of the 2014 edition and that nice like hard case that they all go into, and I desperately want that for this edition. And we'll see if it happens. I've got high hopes that it does because otherwise I'm going to be very sad that I skipped out on these. But for now, I'm a digital boy, and yeah. Live in a digital world. I needed these anyways for running games, so I'll get the set when it releases, the little gift set.
So I sat down with this last night at roughly 8:30, 9 o'clock or so.
Richard is a madman,
and just read it all. Now, to be clear, I did not read every single stat block, but I did actually skim through pretty much everything, and I read a lot of stat blocks. I read a lot of what was in here. It's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of monsters in here. The meat and potatoes is obviously the stat blocks and like little blurbs and lore and abilities lists and stuff like that.
Which is what we'd want.
which is what we want. Yeah. But I read through everything that I could stand to read in one evening, which was quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I really had a good time with what I did read.
It's 384 pages of just monsters and a little bit of how to run them and stuff like that, and how to build encounters and stuff. Just to get off, pretty early off in the show, this is a first impressions. Yes. I have not spent nearly as much time with it as Richard. I have not glanced through every stat block. We also, and most importantly to us, we haven't played any games with these updated monsters.
No.
We don't feel comfortable giving our final opinion on a monster stat block book, call it what it is, without actually playing the game with these stat blocks. So we've got our first impressions today. Get this out as early as we can. In fact, we're recording this almost a week before it'll even go up. So it's even older news by the time you guys see it. Next week, we're going to do another video game thing. We're going to do a fantasy draft that will carry through for, like the next year. That's just for us because it's fun. And then we are going to put together a game. It'll go up on the channel. I'm not sure yet if it's going to be like an episode of the podcast or if it's just going to be supplementary material, it'll go up on YouTube. But that will be at least one of our games. We're going to do our Strahd game and stuff. We'll have multiple instances in our home game. We'll record at least the one of using these new updated stat blocks. And then that following week, we will do a review of this book, an actual full-on review of this monster manual. Our friend Garrett is going to drive up. He's going to jump in on that with us. And the week after that, we're going to be doing a final, let's put a bow on it, overall review of the 2024 revision of the core rulebooks of Dungeons & Dragons. Any questions? Anything else? Did I miss anything?
That wraps it up nicely.
Okay.
Yeah, because this way it actually gives us some real world experience with these stat blocks rather than just reading them. Because it is one thing to read them on a page than it is to actually play through them and see how they interact in real world scenarios.
I mean, you mentioned you didn't read through every single stat block. You read like descriptions, stuff like that. But how many of those stat blocks do you read over? Like, wow, that sounds really cool. But in play, like, how is that gonna go? Like, you know,
how's it gonna go, and how's it gonna really affect things? Yeah.
So we'll get to it.
Yeah.
But for today, for anyone who hasn't already been jumping into like the deluge of other content all over the internet and stuff, we'll run you through our little tidbits here and there.
Our first impressions of the book.
So off the jump, this book. And I'll skip around a bunch too, because, the middle and the giant chunk, like Richard mentioned, is stat block. And you've got the end, which I think is amazing, and the beginning, which I feel is necessary. Starts off showing you basically how to read a stat block, right? You've got, everything. You've never played this game before. This is what your name is, monster. This is how you what your ability scores are for a monster. If you've read a stat block, you've been playing D&D before, none of this is going to seem like, another language to you. It's cleaned up. It's really good, nice. If you've more recent stat blocks have gone this direction, so nothing jumped out at me as being surprising. But it's a welcome change, and it's nice. This nice clean setup follows through the whole book. So even monsters that got slight tweaks here and there are just cleaner, and I appreciate that. Anything else off the jump?
Yeah, no, I was going to say the opening of this book is not a lot of new information for a lot of people. It is just kind of, going with the normal overview of how you're going to be looking at the information presented within. And it does kind of give you an idea of how things are a little bit laid out. The color coding is really nice. I like how they've got like subtle differences and shades and everything like that to make things a little bit more pleasant to look at. Overall, they have cleaned up a lot. And I think that's my favorite thing about the stat blocks is how clean everything is.
Super clean, super easy to read, especially on the fly.
Yeah, and the information is a lot more concise. So they've took out a lot of fluff, and really they're really hammering home the information that you need to know and making that kind of the front and center thing.
Yep.
So I really, really do appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, they do a good job of telling you. Exactly, like, how, this is how big the monster is. This is what type of creature they're. This is where they're from. These are, here's all the things they're immune to, or whatever. It's all just nice and It's simple. And I imagine when we get to our games, I want to, of course, I'm going to plan out some stuff, whatever, but I definitely want to go into at least a scenario or two where I don't have, a monster pre-prepared. Maybe I'll have like a little, I'll list some out on a sheet and I'll roll for it. And whatever pops up, I'll just quickly find in the book. And we'll check that out too. If I'm looking for different type of vampire or some sort of ooze, like how quickly can I find that, read the stat block, and go.
Yeah.
So we're gonna get some actual use out of this. Like I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks, and we will tell you the nitty gritty and how we really feel about this book. I'm sure Garrett's probably already halfway through a game right now as we record this. Using some of this new stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guarantee it.
I think my favorite thing about these new stat blocks is the the narrative information. So
that's great.
Yeah, right when you get the name of your creature, right underneath it, you get a little narrative blurb.
Mm-hmm.
It's about one sentence. We talked about this in the past. We talked about it when Chris talked about it in an interview, and Jerry Crawford also talked about it as well. They're not super in depth. It could be something very simple. The one they give you an example here is a medium or small humanoid neutral evil. Sometimes they go into a little bit more that spooky stack of bones hidden in a swamp kind of a thing that just kind of gets you in a little bit of the mindset of the creature that you're looking at first, which is really cool. I like that. In addition to that, we're also seeing some stuff like the habitat, like you mentioned, so where to find something. And the really cool one I really like is treasure. That one's really cool, and I think it bears mentioning, which will kind of give you an overview of what kind of treasure you might see on this thing, whether or not it's something that has treasure at all, if it doesn't care about possessions at all, or if it cares about hoarding, or if the treasure could be equipment or gold or magic items, whatever it might be.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool, especially when you're trying to plan out an encounter where you might want to put something like a MacGuffin on something, or you want something for your people to find.
Yep.
It's really cool to be able to easily identify a creature that you might be putting in your counter that could fit that bill and be able to carry that thing for you, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, of course. I think the main thing I'm excited about this whole book, obviously we've got new monsters, right? We've got new monsters, we've got tweaks. I'm just excited to jump into our games and see if the new CR values are actually appropriate.
Yeah.
We already have the DMG, so we know, all right, this is how we're going to be building encounters. Okay, cool. And now we got to wait on this book. That's why I think during our review of that, I mentioned that almost felt like part of a book because you couldn't, really utilize those tools with the balance that we had from a decade-old book. You had to wait for this one. So that's another reason I'm excited for our final review, see how it all ties together. But even just going, glancing through the beginning and through some of the monsters, I'm already noticing ones that are tougher and ones that I thought were going to maybe, I'm just gonna say, receive a nerf. There were some that I thought would be weaker, potentially shadows, but no. They are not weaker. In fact, they will still destroy low-level players quite easily, and depending if you have enough of them, high-level players, it's still definitely a thing. So I'm super interested.
Yeah, as far as challenge ratings are considered, throughout the book, as I was reading, I did notice, we kind of expected this too, that overall power levels have creeped up a little bit. So we made the joke about this is our last easy game of Strahd before the new book drops. Yeah, and now things are going to get harder.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few boost ups to a lot of creatures throughout this book, so a lot of stuff did get tougher. So I do believe that is true for the majority of things in here. I think how they balance that though is pretty ingenious, because a lot of the quote unquote new monsters that we get in this book are actually just iterations of monsters that already existed.
Yeah.
I was talking to our work colleague about one of his favorite monsters in the game, because it was one that taunted him.
I wasn't part of this.
In Icewind Dale.
We're talking about the bullet?
Yeah, because he loves bullets.
Oh, he loves them.
And now we have bullet pups, which are really cool.
Adorable.
So you have a smaller version. So if you wanted to use it, you can have an earlier encounter that wouldn't quite go the way that it went in that campaign for him.
Yeah.
But could still feature that cool little creature. So, it's not going to eat him like the other one did. But
I mean, he was pretty little.
and then the same thing goes for like things like vampires, right? So you have, multiple different types of things.
You want to fight a vampire, but you're not ready to fight.
But you're not ready to fight. Werewolves, there, there's a lot of different things in here where you're getting like half rating CRs and, stuff like that allow you to use these things.
They're not fully transformed.
Destroy your party. But if you want to destroy the party, obviously there's a lot of options there with some of these higher CR ratings. And overall, there's a power creep there. So there is some stronger stuff in here, and some of these abilities are a lot more fleshed out. There's just a lot of changes as far as the way like spellcasters work, right? And a lot of the ways that like abilities work. So gone are things like spell slots, and now all the abilities are like streamlined and cleaned up to be like once or twice a day. Or on recharge, that sort of a thing. And
which is so much easier.
Yeah, it's just going to make things a lot easier for the game masters to keep track of. And it does make some of these things a little bit more powerful too, because you're going to be using them more as a dungeon master, I think.
I think it also, this is kind of a side, this back to the whole, this is a set, right? Counterspell on paper received a nerf, right? But with the new version of Counterspell, like, oh, well, if you counterspell, whatever, you retain the, slot or whatever. If you're being used on a player, if your bad guy uses it, and your players keep their spell slot. If you do it to a bad guy, it's not a spell slot. That spell is gone. So is that a buff? Because you were just erasing that spell from their kit, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
We got to look at this whole thing. And we finally have the last piece of the puzzle, the 3-piece puzzle.
The 3-piece puzzle.
So I'm intrigued. One thing you might have missed, or not missed, you might have said this and I might have missed it. The art, and we say it every book.
I hadn't touched on the art yet.
Whoo boy.
Yeah.
If we're going through, we're talking about how everybody's stat block is cleaned up. The art for this freaking book is amazing. And it might be cheating to be like, this might be my favorite art in one of these books so far, because every single monster has art.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think it's interesting because you look at the other books, we talk about the art, right? And how great the
always
art
do.
is.
Yep.
And this book, the art seems to stand out a little bit more just because there is a lot of it. There's so much art in this book. Everything from, like little tiny corners of a page to like full kind of like half pages for certain things. And then some incidences where like you get like full page artwork. Like one of my favorite ones that I showed you earlier was the Copper Dragon.
Yeah.
Which was a nanny copper dragon with a bunch of baby creatures of all different species, kind of that it was taking care of, reading books to and everything like that. Really, really good stuff. There's just so much excellent art in this book.
And they do some of the things too, like where like the slads, for example, there's like different types.
Yeah.
In some of the art, you have got pictures of multiple of a creature, like the different variants in the same art, which is also a cool take of it. So you don't have like necessarily a single piece of art for every one. Sometimes they show them interacting in a scene together, which is even better. You get to see how they interact in an environment. Some of the bigger ones, like creatures using attacks and what their spells in some cases, or breath weapons and other, like just what they would look like in combat or just interacting in their environment. I think is super swell.
Yeah. I think probably the best thing about this book, so aside from like the new stat blocks and everything like that, is just how well it is laid out. So we kind of went over a little bit, like in the front of the book is just telling you how to read the book, right? So how to like interpret this stuff and how to interpret the entries. And if you've never done this before, like what you're looking at. But then you get to the actual book itself, and it's well laid out in alphabetical order, number one. So if you want to find something and you know the name of it, it's very easy to go to that and find it. But then you get to the end of the book and you get to the monster lists. And this is probably, like, I think, one of my favorite parts of the book is being able to look at a list of monsters based on criteria that you want. And it almost feels like you're online.
The variations of lists.
Yes,
Yeah.
Because it's all like, well, if I'm online and I'm looking at something and, like I'm running an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, and I want to pare it down, I'll filter it down by, like this column or whatever.
It's a great way to put it.
And it feels like that, but it's in a book. So if I want to know, like, okay, I'm going to be doing a game that's based in the desert, right? I'll go to that desert table and it'll list all the, appropriate monsters that I could find in a desert. And they're all listed there. If I just want to do it by challenge rating instead of habitat. So if I'm looking for specifically just, like challenge rating 3 stuff, I can go there and look at it by challenge rating. And you can do it from, there's habitat, there's creature type, there's group of creatures, and challenge rating. And that's just really, really cool.
It's sick.
So that,
like what else would they add? Color?
I mean, that convenience just makes this book really easy to use, right? Because you can find something that you want without having to just flip through and looking at pictures and names. Even if you don't know the name of something, you can look up based on that. Like if I want, like a specific type of creature, I can look up that specific type of creature and go directly to it. So that's really, really nice. And I love that addition to the back. I've seen so many not useful indexes lately. It is fun to have something. And
we're not going to bring up, we're not going to name names again, but like we've reviewed a book that had a unusable index.
Yeah.
Where if you haven't been following, watching the channel for long, Richard like looked up online, basically was like, what is up with this? Like went on, search for certain things, and the only things that would pop up had nothing to do with what he was actually trying to find. And it was just unusable. Like it must have been auto-generated, which is super unfortunate because something like this looks like
purposefully built.
Very purposely built. All the love and care that possibly could go into an index went into this thing. And for something that's feels as nerdy as, wow, the index sure is good, it multiplies the benefit of having this book. Like, great art, great stat blocks, etc., etc. Oh, supposedly great stat blocks. We'll find out. The fact that you can search for creatures so easily outside of just alphabetically, amazing. Chef's kiss. Way to go. It should have been, oh, why doesn't every book do this? Now, yeah, why doesn't every book do this?
Yeah, why
because this is amazing.
Every book do this, yeah.
So, love every bit of that. Having animals have their own, stat block. Did you already bring up the? I've been doing a lot of reading while talking, so forgive me. Did you already bring up the conversions?
No, the conversion list is really fun.
Yes. Basically, it's not crazy long. There's not a million things that went through this, but it's super helpful, especially for someone like me who's running an older book or older module right now. They have conversion section where you can go through, and it has a list of the 2014 version of a monster, and whether either the direct change, like, hey, here, look up this creature. It is this creature, but just updated, or this creature doesn't exist anymore. Here is the most similar one that you can fit in there, and just theme it to be that other one. But basically, just a 1-to-1. Here's the stat block you should be using in reference to what that module you are running currently says you should use, which, awesome.
It's neat because it's not something that they had to include.
No.
Like, this is something that, like, I wouldn't have even considered an option for them to put in this book, because when you think about it, it's an interesting thing to put in because it really only references legacy content.
Totally.
And in a world where you usually leave behind legacy content, you don't want to reference legacy content as much, at least a lot of companies don't. They didn't have to do that. And it wouldn't have been something that people would have complained about not having.
Yeah.
But we got it, and it is super convenient. It's just nice to be able to kind of pick through and say, like, okay, well, yeah, this is what I was using, and this is what I should use if I want to stay, somewhat similar in line with.
Yeah, and some of the ones aren't like direct, right? So if 2014 book you're running calls for a drow mage, the 1-to-1, they want you to use the bandit deceiver. Because and you're looking this up, you might be running through, well, there's no drow mage in here. You're right. That's not a thing. However, this is the closest thing to it, and it's what they are letting us know would be, what they recommend using. If you're doing a adult blue Dracolich, you're going to use the Dracolich. It's a little bit easier. Using the Goblin, you're going to use the Goblin Warrior. Okay. Well, 2014, maybe you're looking for a, here we go. There's some weird ones in here, I promise. Tribal Warrior or Warrior Infantry. I don't know. It's neat. Young Red Shadow Dragon. No, it's just Shadow Dragon. Either way, I appreciate it, especially since everything's alphabetical. If I'm in the R's looking for red, I'm like, no, that's not there. Like, you're looking for this. Cool, thanks.
Yeah. And you brought it up earlier, but I wanted to touch base on it again.
Please do.
Is the animal list.
Yes.
So we have the monsters, right? So this is like the bulk of everything. This is our monster list. And then we have like a subsection of animal lists, which are just more common animals, right? So these are not necessarily like fantastic beasts of any sort, but like a sea turtle, an ape, you know what I mean? Like just generalized kind of animals. There are some dinosaurs in there.
And right off the top, they do tell you, like, there's a little blurb at the top that says, fantastic animals. The following stat blocks in this appendix represent fantastical versions of real world animals.
Real world animals.
And they do tell you some, like, like giant owl, avian sages, and soothsayers. Like, it gets very fancy right off the jump.
Yeah, it's just nice to have something like that, because these aren't necessarily monsters that you're going to have that are like, big set piece style things or big spooky scary things, but they are things that come up. And it's nice to have stat blocks that are there that can represent an actual thing that might be in your game, or that you could skin into something based on your game. Like if you have something in your game, like a creature that's in a world that you're homebrewing that's not something that's real, if you can find a close enough amalgamation to it in the animal list, it's really easy to be able to pull that from there.
Maybe your druid needs it.
Yeah, and maybe your druid needs it. And kind of along the same lines, we have some really cool stuff in here that's not necessarily monsters, so to speak, like the commoners entry.
Yes,
which is really
good call.
Cool.
Yep.
So commoners, there's just stat blocks for commoners. These are just people, like a baker or, the cobbler in a village or something like that. So you have commoner stats that you can use to actually populate NPCs and stuff, which is really cool.
Yeah, they really put a lot of thought into making this book include everything you would need.
Yeah, that's the thing, was as you're reading through it, you'll come across just so much stuff that you didn't think that you would need.
Yeah.
And that's all just in here. I think the only like interesting ones to me are like right in the beginning of the book. Number one is you have the Aarakocra, which I think is interesting because Aarakocra, I always think of like playable characters, right? And not so much the same thing.
Totally.
And the same thing when I saw the GIF in here. So you have GIF Yankee in here too. I don't think about those as monsters, so to speak. I always think of them as just another playable species, but they're definitely in here, as well as some other things like,
druid
centaurs.
There's just a druid
and stuff like
stat
that.
block because, hey, I need a druid, but I don't want to break out, the player's handbook and make a whole up character just to be like, oh, cool. Now I know what my, basic NPC druid is doing. I can just go to the base druid stat block and be like, all right, neat. Here is their base stat block. Here are some spells most druids would have. Here's, based on like weapons that they would have. They have a staff. They have a vine staff, and you could, flavor and tweak anything, of course, like D&D, anything you want to. Yeah. But to have that baseline that you can flip to easily, A+.
Yeah, I think overall, I'm just very satisfied with the way this book is laid out and the way that it reads.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that I was missing when I first started reading it, and the more I think about it, the more I don't think I'm missing it, I kind of expected there to be a monster builder in here.
Making some custom stuff.
Yeah, I thought we would see something more along the lines of how to custom make your own monsters. But then the more I think about it, the sheer number of monsters in this book, right? And everything that's in here, I don't think we really need it, because there's so much in here that if you can't find something that fits what you need in here, it's really easy to skin anything in here, like they talk about doing with the Fantastic Animals section. And that was, I mean, like, the more I think about it, the less I think that maybe we don't need a monster builder. And I think that the reason why they probably didn't include it is the nuances required in building a monster and have the challenge rating matter and be applicable in an encounter builder.
Sure. I mean, and then if you just walk through the, they've got this section right off the jump, the parts of the stat block. If you go through that and you just follow along with how they built and designed their monsters, just follow the roadblocks. Just do what they did.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you could do that if you really wanted to. Like I said, I saw it as like
you've got enough there. Just skin something.
Yeah, I saw like I said, I saw it as a glaring omission. Sure. Like I was looking for it in the book because I kind of expected it to be there, and then I didn't find it, and I was a little bit taken back. But then, like I said, the more I thought about it, the more I don't think it really is necessary, and that's why they didn't include it. But that would be like the only thing that I was kind of like, wonder why that's not here.
Yeah. And just going to read this little bit right here for, some of the stuff we've missed. We'll wrap this up pretty soon. It'll be a shorter one. It's first impressions. We'll get our full review in a couple of weeks, and it'll probably be too long. So we'll balance it out. But right off the top here, they tell you, and I appreciate this too, what's new in the 2025 version, because that's what we're all here for. This is the 2025 version of the 5th edition. Oh, they do call it the 2025 version.
Which is funny because on D&D Beyond, it's listed as the 2024.
And all the marketing I've ever read has always said 2024. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. No, scrap it. We can start the whole episode over. This is the 2025 version of the 5th edition Monster Manual. If you've read the 2014 version, much of this book will feel familiar, since the fundamental rules and variety of monsters are the same. Much of the book contains new or redesigned elements, and the monsters herein replace versions from the older books. Here are the highlights. More monsters. The number of monsters has increased to more than 500 stat blocks. That's amazing. New monsters. Dozens of new monsters, including more high-level threats, are ready to challenge characters of all levels. Refined rules. Every stat block has been updated for ease of use and game balance. Enhanced stat blocks. New stat block design and language prioritize details vital during play, which is what I was getting at. What you need to know is easily knowable. You flip to it right there. Versatile groups. Non-player characters now appear alongside other monsters and can represent individuals of any humanoid species. Why didn't we just read this first? This could have been the whole episode. That's everything we said, but better put. Improved organization. Monsters are now organized alphabetically by their name. Variations on the same monster are grouped together, which is sick. So I did go through, I was looking at Succubus and Incubus. They are not together. You can, after a long rest, whatever, you can turn from one to the other, so they are technically whatever. In my mind, I expected them to be grouped together, though.
Oh, in the same entry.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
And they're not.
No.
Which is on me. But by this, I expected it to be. I don't know. I feel like you don't get one without the other, but maybe that's just me. Expanded list. Appendix B collects and expands lists of monster details that appeared in the 2014 Dungeon Master's Guide. Every monster in the 2014 Monster Manual appears in this book or has a CR appropriate replacement detailed in Appendix B. That is the full big asterisk of this book, and it's hidden there in the last line. Not because I think maybe I'm misremembering, but they did tell us everything's going to be there. Asterisk.
Yeah.
Or similar.
Yeah.
So I'll take it. I'm happy with what we got. Maybe I won't be happy in a couple of weeks. We'll find out.
No, I think overall, you will be happy with this book once you actually sit down and read it.
Do you think you guys are going to be happy when you have to fight these new versions of monsters?
Oh, ecstatic.
Yes.
After reading through these stat blocks, there's some really fun stuff in here that will keep players on their toes as far as how they're facing these beasts and how more streamlined they are. There's going to be a lot more usage of abilities, I think.
Okay.
By game masters, as far as really, really kind of going all out with these beasts when they're fighting their party members, which you're going to need to based on the power levels of the, actual NPCs or the PCs creeping up, right?
Yes, PCs have definitely
PCs
bumped
have
up.
gotten more powerful in general, so the monsters needed to kind of keep pace with that. And I think it's overall going to make for more exciting encounters. So I'm excited to see these things play out in real, because I think it's going to be, like I said, really fun to see just more stuff happening.
Yeah.
More abilities being thrown, and more layer actions for the big guys and how those interact, and all the special abilities, legendary stuff. There's going to be a lot of really cool moments that are going to come from a lot of these revised stats.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see if it takes a minute to like readjust, or if you guys are just dead off the rip. If I overcorrect.
No, I don't think you're going to overcorrect. I think someone's
or if you guys aren't going to be ready.
That's what I'm saying. I think what's going to happen is I'm going to expect it.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to go and expect it.
You're one of four.
And then there's another person at our table who no idea what's coming.
I love how you say he, because I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yes. And you are going to reach across the table and open hand smack him in the face, and he's going to look at you in shock and then immediately have to adjust. And he's going to be into it. And like I said, he's not going to see that coming.
Yeah.
And it's going to be like those, those actual memes where they have the slap fights, like the Olympic slap fighting. That's what I see. And it's going to be an adjustment, but I think it's going to be an adjustment for the better.
We're in the new era.
Yeah, we're in the new era. I think my favorite thing about this book, and I hadn't brought it up yet, and
cover.
And I want to bring it up before we leave
yeah, of course.
off, is something that I think it was Jeremy Crawford mentioned it very quick in passing in one of the interviews that he was doing about this. And I didn't think much about it until I actually sat down and started reading the book. And I had that moment. I realized I was doing it, and then had the recovered memory of him saying it. And I thought it was silly when he said it at the time, because it's not how I've traditionally ever done things. Being very circular about this. But really what it comes down to is opening up a book and getting inspiration from entries that you're reading for things that you want to do in games, and in building an encounter based around a specific entity. And sometimes building entire ideas for one-shots and campaigns based off of something that you read in here. There's a lot of really cool stuff in here where you hit off, like one of the very first entries in the book. It's all in alphabetical. So the very first one that you come across, one of the big ones, is aboleths, which are that deep sea horror, basically alien entities. And you get to see one of the cool new tables in there. So I pulled it up here. It's called Aboleth Schemes, and it's a D6 roll. And that D6 roll will tell you a rate will randomize what the aboleth might be doing, like in this plane of existence, and why they're there. And it's kind of like a motivation thing. And like I said, I started reading this book, and that was one of the very first ones that you hit, AB.
Yeah.
And I started reading aboleth. And by the time I got to the end of the entry for aboleth, I had an entire idea about an aboleth living under a city, using basically like control methods to control like a small underground like network of thieves, and using those to influence players. So a bunch of people that have no control over their actions and manipulating the above city kind of a thing.
This is
and it reminded me a little bit of Baldur's Gate, with the Elder Brain and stuff like that. But like the idea is that I found this happening a lot while reading this book.
Amazing.
I would go through and I would stop on something, and like one of the new creatures, Elemental Cataclysm, I think it's called. I saw the artwork and I thought it was Tiamat at first. Artwork is beautiful. It's like like this massive dragon, but then you look at his body, it's all earth, and then there's multiple heads, one of wind, one of fire, one of water. And it's an idea of like this gigantic elemental beast that changes the landscape before it leaves the plane, essentially. And that just started to give me ideas of entire campaigns based around it, or in like one shots based around something like that happening. And it, like I said, Jeremy Crawford, I think, mentioned it in an interview where it's like they wanted people to be able to read this book and have inspiration for encounters based on seeing a monster in this book. And I kept having that happen to me as I read through. I would read through and find an entry and then immediately think about like how that would play out and how I would love to see it in a game. There's a creature in here that is a swarm of just zombie hands, right? And I immediately pictured our party in Strahd stumbling on a tomb and having to fight off, like 30 just individual disembodied hands swarming down from the walls and like climbing all over us and everything, and how hilarious and terrifying it could be. And it was cool. I like that about this book. It's so easy to thumb through and just find inspiration to build.
Would you say it's the descriptions they've included or the artwork that's pushing you towards this the most?
So it's a lot to do with the artwork.
Yeah.
So the descriptions are good. And that is one thing, as far as first impressions, I'll give a negative. So my first real negative to this book, and it's not a huge mark, but it is a negative, is there are so many monsters in here. There's so much beautiful artwork. And the stat blocks are large, easy to read, and everything like that.
Yeah.
Because of that, they had to pull back in some areas. Where they pulled back is in descriptions and lore. So it's still there. You're still getting a lot of information about these creatures. Maybe not as much as we've gotten in the past. Because in the past, you had books where you didn't have artwork and they had to fill a page.
Right. You have to paint a word picture.
They painted word pictures, and that a lot of times meant a lot more lore and a lot more information. So we don't have as much of that here. So on one hand, it is kind of a negative because you're not having a lot of lore. But on the other hand, I can also see them doing this on purpose because it's now letting you build that lore into your worlds.
Sure. And in a world where you have to hit that page count.
Yeah.
Would you have traded one for the other?
So I think we're at a really good sweet spot.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying it's a negative, but it's not. Like, it's hard
for the greater
really,
good.
Yeah, it's hard to really call it out as being a super negative thing.
I still appreciate me calling out something you wish was improved upon.
Because, like I said, the inspiration is still there, even without this massive booklets of lore. There is still some lore in there, and there's still some really good descriptions, but the inspiration is still there because of the awesome artwork and because of how easy it is to envision these creatures. When we talked about the stat block, including things like habitat and everything like that, and that little kind of like blurb of information, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it's enough for you to look at a creature and automatically start to paint yourself a word picture of how that creature is going to be interacting in your world with your players.
Yeah. I mean, it's super important too, especially for people who haven't been playing the game for a long time. Like, if you don't know what a flump is, which of course, if you have been playing, you know what a flump is. And if you haven't been playing, you're like, what's a flump? What's a Nothic? Like, what are these things? Well, congratulations. If you're flipping through this book, by the time you read the name, just below is the art, and whoa, why is that thing staring at me with the creepiest one eyeball I've ever seen in my life?
Is so cool looking though.
Yeah.
Oh, that artwork.
But as soon as you, like you said, as soon as you see it, you can picture it in an environment. You can get a sense for how it moves almost because of the body positions they put it in, and that helps you describe it so much. I mean, the Nothic is a great example, right? So the artwork for this, it's hunched over, big bright eyeball, like lighting up the area it's around. There's a corpse decomposing in the background. It's got its fingers all twisted in odd angles, and there's like drool dripping out of its mouth. It's awesome. This creature probably moves in erratic ways and like has a humanoid shape, but doesn't move naturally, in a human would do. And you can just paint a word picture yourself and fill a whole scene with just that little one singular picture. And, you don't have to Google what the heck a Nothic looks like.
Yeah, you don't have to. It's right there.
Yeah. So I like it.
Yeah, it's like I said, it makes drawing inspiration so easy. And I did not expect that, but kept having it happen to me as I turned the page. Like every time I turned the page and read a new entry, all the way through the entire book, every time I saw something, it just sparks inspiration every time you see it. And it's so easy to envision them in your games and how you could use them. And I think it's going to make building encounters really fun.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Just because there's so many options out there. So many options. And it's really, really well laid out and really good. So
I like it. So anything else before we head out?
No, I think I think that pretty much covers it for first impressions. Overall, my first impression is nice.
Yeah,
I
overall,
like
I'm positive on it so far.
Solid entry, it seems, to the core.
We'll see if we come back a little more negative, in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
We're going to get some games under our belt.
Can't wait to see it in
We'll
action.
bring a friend, and we'll dive extra deep into this. We'll touch on some things we didn't today. We might even touch on some things we did, but with a little more, I don't know, fine detail. Or argue a bunch. Garrett's going to be on.
Yeah, Garrett will be on.
I'll pick a fight, I promise. Hey, to everyone who is new to the channel, thanks for joining us. Subscription, likes, all those things are appreciated. 5 stars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those things like that. Your positive affirmation helps keeps the lanterns lit. So, everyone who has been joining us for a long time, hi, how are you? We're finally wrapping up our D&D core book soon. And this has been its own journey. If you've been here since the beginning of the podcast, we basically started off around the time they were doing the play test for this stuff. So, man, we're 102 episodes now, and we've just been covering so much of this to get to this point, and we're finally almost there, Richard. Finally. And this is, wow, what a year this is going to be. We've already got new UA testing that we have to get to at some point.
Yeah.
So that has to be down the road. We got Daggerheart coming out soon, air quotes soon. And just, I'm so excited for this year. It's going to be a good one. So if you are new and you want to stick around and be here with us for that year, come back again next week. But for now, I've been Tyler.
And I've been Richard.
And we've been True Strike. See ya.
Bye.
Hey, adventurers. Thanks again for joining us today. Please be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. If there's any questions you'd like to write into the show, you can hit us up on Threads, Blue Sky, or Instagram. New episodes release every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening to True Strike.